what is extremism? And you bring up in your book JM Berger's definition as the belief system that an in-group success or survival can never be separate from the need for hostile action against an outgroup. Now, I had a little bit of my own stint with political extremism in 2006, and I've witnessed the mainstreaming of radicalization in the last 5 years. It's come home in a lot of ways, and where it's in our neighborhoods. And I've been stunned by just how many people I know that have been radicalized. Some people I won't know it, and then I'm having conversations with them, and I'm like, wow, this person's radicalized. Maybe they're not in a violent way, but just in an ideological way. So help, what's going on? Why is this happening, and why is it a problem now?
This is part of the reason I love Berger's definition, because extremism as a term we use in lots of different contexts. And when it gets used in the context of violence and terrorism, and we say that political party or that candidate is extremist, and you hear this on media a lot by various influencers, like they're not using the term precisely, right? In my version of the world, the way that my profession looks at it, they're using it to, describe things with these broad brushstrokes. But I don't find that very helpful, right? Like when we weaponize the term, be like, you're an extremist or they're an extremist, it's a shorthand and we're not actually getting to the root of the issue. It also does a disservice to actual extremism. And that's why definitions matter. So extremism from a security context is tied to the hostile action. Okay. But it's hostile action in the context of an in-group perceiving a threat to their success or survival by an out-group. Yeah. And the problem that we have right now is that without the hostile action, take that out of it, just that first part of the definition of an in-group perceives a threat to their success or survival by an out-group, that is the entirety of our politics these days. Everybody will tell you
in many ways.
Yes, like you've got to vote for our candidate because the other side is going to ruin our country. It is the most consequential election of our lifetime, the end of democracy if we elect this person or that person. And look, you're not going to change the politicians or their campaign consultants who produce all those commercials, because outrage, anger, and fear sells. It is like one of the most powerful emotions. It's why social media works. It's designed to get you outraged and designed to keep you scared, because it gets your eyeballs and that gets ad money. The influencers on TV, they get their viewers because they're constantly whipping you into a frenzy of fear and outrage. We always talked about it back in the day. If it bleeds, it leads, right? You remember, this is like kind of quaint conversation compared to where we are now, but that used to be the common. Why is the news always negative? Well, because that's how you get viewers. Nobody turns in at 6 o'clock to see puppies and rainbows. They want to know, like, is my community still safe? And why did the mayor steal the money? And right, it's corruption, it's violence. That's what gets eyeballs and sells newspapers. And now we've just amplified it with social media. So part of this is just human behavior. And we live in an age where that human behavior can be exploited so easily and cheaply. And so if we have to acknowledge that's the world we live in. And so if you want to operate differently, you're going to have to make choices to be conscious that that is how the world operates. They're intentionally trying to make you angry and fearful. And then find ways to like break that cycle and remove yourself from it, right? Because we're just constantly saturated in it. So here's the problem. If that's our normal steady state, is constant fear and outrage from our various media sources, then it becomes not too hard for somebody to step in and say, this existential threat, we might need to do something more than vote and donate money to our candidate of choice. We might need to do something violent. And that's the hostile action piece. And as ideologies form, they usually start, not saying, let's build a bomb. They're starting with like, we got to do more, like get out and vote or get out and protest. And then it might be like, well, we need to be prepared for a bad day. So maybe we need to stockpile some weapons, which, hey, is allowable under the Second Amendment. That's totally doable. But when a political party or a group that's like, organizing around a certain ideology starts going down that path, it usually doesn't stay there. It turns into a spectrum of actions. And the good news is most people don't ever progress to the worst part of the spectrum. But hostile action isn't just violence. It's a whole suite of concerning behaviors. And it starts with threats and intimidation, bullying, and harassment, which are for the most part not criminal, although, in times and places it can be. You can often use civil law to push back against it. But generally speaking, we've just allowed civil society to police that, right? Like we raise each other, we raise our kids, we have norms in how we treat a police officer or how we treat a school teacher. And it is, of course, not through threats and intimidation and bullying and harassment. And then the upper end of the spectrum is where you get into that criminal space. It might be hate crimes or destruction of property. And then you get into terrorism and genocide being the upper end of that spectrum. The problem of the moment that we live in is that our norms have just kind of gone by the wayside, particularly COVID. COVID was this big amplifier where all of a sudden we could yell at the flight attendant or at the school board member or the school teacher because, COVID was hard and I'm just going to yell at you because I can. And so like all of a sudden we are yelling at people and bullying and harassing and leaving voicemails on people, people who serve as local county commissioner or the election judge and threatening their grandchildren because, I'm pretty sure you stole the election. Like preposterous conspiracy theories and saying things either in online spaces or through voicemail that you almost never would say in person, or certainly not in a way that somebody could discover you. So it starts kind of on that lower end of the spectrum. And then as you feel empowered or as other people encourage you, maybe you do it in public. Maybe you do associate your name with those threats. And if it goes unpunished, you just kind of keep accelerating it, not just punished, but if it gets lauded by your community. And that's how you end up with more and more people willing to commit violence as a solution to this us-them context that our politics is creating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we're both parents. So it's like if you let your kid keep doing the bad behavior from 2-year-old to high school, like it's going to escalate, right? And then it's going to be harder to deal with later on versus early.